What's up, internet friends, and welcome to another episode of the PlayStation Plus Game Club. I'm your host, Kevin Garaventa, aka the Portland Kevin, and this is a show where we pick one game from the PlayStation Plus library and break it down for your entertainment, information, and amusement. This time, we are talking about Shadow of the Colossus. In 2018, Bluepoint Games remade the 2005 classic by Team Ico, which is part of Sony's Japan studio. This is extremely faithful remake on the PlayStation 4 perfectly recreates Fumito Ueda's vision of the original game on the PlayStation 2, but in higher graphical quality. So joining me to talk about this updated PlayStation classic is the host of the Trophy Talk podcast, Colin Kolhoven. Welcome to the show.
Hey, hello, sir. Hello, internet friends. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to discuss this game with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here.
Quite a bit to say, I think.
When I heard that you were playing this game, I immediately reached out to you and I said, hey, if we haven't picked a game yet, let's talk about this one because I really think it needs to be talked about. So I'm glad that you agreed to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't normally get a chance to speak about games in the same way that you do on your show here. So that's also very exciting for me to kind of stretch a little bit, flex some different muscles in terms of game discussion.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to it.
You've got a different kind of gaming podcast. So tell us a little bit about Trophy Talk.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah. So I am the host over on the Trophy Talk podcast. It is a podcast that we do every other week. I have two other co-hosts over there, Slugger JD and Daryl Fuimano, who you may have heard on a previous episode of this show discussing things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, yeah, we get together every other week. We discuss more recent games that have come out and their trophy lists. And then we also talk about the games that we have been playing and our specific journeys to Platinum and Trophy Hunt. So it is very focused on the trophy ecosystem on the PlayStation side. And because of that, we try not to really get into story and spoiler stuff too much with the games we play. So again, that's sort of where the depth comes in from being over here. So very exciting.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm very glad to have you here. We're going to talk a lot about like just the game's impact on, the player and like what you kind of feel like as you're going through. We are going to have a small spoiler discussion at the end, but there is a lot to talk about here just in general when it comes to this game. So if you want to be part of an episode just like Colin here, you can send us an email at psplusgameclub@gmail.com with game suggestions or thoughts you have about our monthly featured game. If you enjoy this episode and want to hear more, please like and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening. It really helps the show like pick up in other algorithms and other services. It helps us like reach new listeners. So I really appreciate anyone out there listening already. You can find me on Discord, the Portland Kevin. And you can also email us at psplusgameclub@gmail.com. Colin, where can people find you?
Sure. Yeah. So you can find me on Discord, PlayStation Network, YouTube, Twitch, Xbox, pretty much everywhere at CKPresent, CKPresent. And you can find our show, Trophy Talk Podcast, in most places as well. We are now recently on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and we also have a Discord channel that we would love for you to come and join. We actually also have a Patreon. I don't want to plug people spending money too much necessarily, but if you want to, if you check out the show and you like it, you can head on over patreon.com/Trophy Talk Podcast. Got various tiers of support over there. So thanks
absolutely. Yeah. And I am an avid listener of your show, and I think it's fantastic.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. But yeah, I love talking about games, and to talk about this month's game, Shadow of the Colossus, I can't wait to dive into it.
Same.
Let's try and give anyone listening a basic overview of what this game is as far as a story goes, because it's very not abstract, but it does not give you much in terms of like a story exhibition, or it doesn't tell you a lot of what's happening. It just kind of shows you something, and you kind of have to infer things from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. One of the things that I had found when researching this game, and I should say I really tried to minimize reading what other people thought about this before we recorded today. Didn't listen to any spoiler casts or anything like that because I kind of wanted to form my own opinion. But inevitably, I did hear a little bit about his name is Fumita Ueda? I can't remember. What's his first name?
Yeah. Fumito
Ueda, and sort of his design philosophy, which is addition by subtraction. And I think that core tenet informs everything in the game, including the story, like you brought up. So you're really just thrust into the events of this world. And I will admit that when I first launched up the game, there is a cinematic that plays before you get to the sort of main menu. Yeah. And I thought the story had just started. So I just sat there and I watched the whole thing, and then I realized, like, oh, wait a minute, this is just like the loading kind of before we even get into the game. But it's a very what's the word I'm trying to find? It's a very interesting take right off the bat for the story to take. You know, it really puts you in the shoes of the main character who's unnamed initially. You're on some sort of a journey and or quest. All you really know is that you're accompanied by a horse and what appears to be a body, I suppose, with you on this horse as you journey through the lands. You get to see some very mild sort of life in the form of a hawk and some other things like that. But you really don't know where you're going, why you're going there, or what you're going to find when you get there. There's no dialogue, those types of things. So I was really stricken by the opening to the game. I thought it left quite a good impact and made me want to find out more. But I am curious, actually, for you, did you play the original? Because I did not. So I'm coming into this really fresh.
No, the original is a game that I think I've bought probably 4 to 5 times in different iterations.
Oh, wow.
And like, I think counting it in my head, no, I think I've only bought it like 3 times in total. But all 3 of those times were after the first time I played it. A friend of mine lent me the game back in 2006 and said, you got to try this. And so I did. And I thought it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. And then when I moved out of that apartment and didn't have access to my roommate's PlayStation anymore, I bought my own copy of Shadow of the Colossus on PS2. A few years later, back in 2011, they released the HD compilation of Fumito Ueda's 2 games at the time, and I bought that version. Played all the way through that game a couple of times on PlayStation 3, and then when they announced the remake for PlayStation 4, released in 2018, I immediately bought that on release day because I had to have it. I have a vivid memory of like sitting on the couch watching Sony's E3 presentation the year before, and just the first shot of the trailer comes up and you just see the castle from Shadow of the Colossus. And I immediately just shout out, oh shit, like, because I was so excited and I knew right away what I was looking at. So I was so excited for this game. Playing this version it's so faithful to the original that there's almost nothing that has been changed. So I felt like I was just revisiting one of my favorite games of all time and remembering how good it looked without removing those rose tinted glasses and seeing all the flaws that were happening on PS2. But It was amazing, even looking back, that they got this game to run on the PlayStation 2, where there's just this immense sense of scale, where you're in this desolate area, this desolate land, and you have to fight these giants that are the size of buildings. And just the idea that they got that kind of thing to happen on the PlayStation 2 is amazing to me. Not to mention the fact that if you want to travel from one place to the next in this land, there's no loading screen at all. It's pretty incredible that they were able to pull that off. There are only a few other games on PlayStation 2 that I can think of that attempted that, and they masked their loading pretty well. But in this one, I couldn't even tell you where it is, like at what point it happens. So I thought that was really cool. In this PlayStation 4 version, it's pretty much like they took that exact game and just painted over everything graphics-wise and left all the rest. And that's how faithful it feels. And for some people, that's a good thing, and for some people, it's not, because this game definitely was divisive when it came out, because what you're supposed to do is find a Colossus in this land, climb it, and then kill it. And climbing it is supposed to feel really hard. And that's why the controls don't make things easy. They're not that intuitive, and it does feel like you're a little bit uncomfortable and really fighting your way up this thing to get to the top, or wherever the weak points are. But that's how devoted they were to recreating the PlayStation 2 Classic. So I really have to commend Blue Point Games for really sticking with that and creating something that is incredibly special.
It's really, a couple things there that I want to touch on. One thing that's really interesting is that Blue Point is just very, very good at their craft, and it's funny to me that this will be the second game I've played from them that I did not play the original. So the same thing occurred for me with Demon's Souls, the PS5 remaster or remake, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I found that game so intriguing that it kind of, it interested me in going back and watching speedruns and looking at stuff for the original for Demon's Souls. Kind of the same thing happened here, but it's really nice for someone like me who wasn't part of the PlayStation ecosystem until the PS4 as a way to get to experience some of these older titles that really made the console and made the ecosystem what it is.
Yeah.
In things like Shadow and Demon's Souls. So I can only hope they do that for Eco, man, at some point. Oh my gosh,
yeah, it would be wonderful. Eco being the other Fumitsu Uedo game that came before this one, but that one's great as well. Thinking about what other Blue Point games they've done, like that they've remastered. Blue Point remastered God of War 3. They brought it to the PlayStation 4, and for a long time I just thought like, oh well, they ported God of War 3 over to PS4, like just because it's so perfectly redone over there. But no, they completely recreated it, because it wasn't as easy as just bringing the files over onto PlayStation 4. The architecture of the difference between architecture for PS3 and PS4 is completely different. So, it's not something they can just put on PS4 and call it a day. They had to completely recreate it, but they did it so well that I didn't even notice that it was recreated. Like I just thought it was ported over. So
sure.
They
Same
are
thing with the Uncharted games as well.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah. They're masters at doing that, at recreating, other masterpieces. And I'm excited for whatever they're working on next. But this particular remake is, it's just so faithful that they even made it feel like it's just hard to play sometimes. So
yeah. Well, I'm curious. What are your thoughts on that? Because you brought this up, right? And I think in my discussion on it over on our show, I didn't mean to come off as hard on people who say the controls are bad. I'm not trying to alienate anybody or anything like that. Yeah. My personal experience with it, though, is that I actually didn't find the controls to be that weird. Now, I am playing on modern. There's a couple different control schemes in the game. And I understand sort of the philosophy of things like when you're riding aggro, which is your horse around, right? Aggro is not going to listen to every single command that you input because it's trying to emulate a live actual animal.
Yeah.
That's all good. That makes total sense to me. And the same thing for the way the climbing works, where you have moments of you literally just shouldn't even try because the Colossus is shaking or there's movement or something's happening. You should just sit still, hold down right trigger and wait for it to kind of calm down before you move. And for me, that was all very intuitive. So I didn't really find that the controls fought me as much as many people led me to believe. So I'm kind of curious what you think in your experience with the game. Did that happen for you? Like, how do you feel about the controls, I guess, after you've played it so many times?
I think they're perfect for what they need to accomplish. And sure, like, they're not easy to play with. Like, you really have to learn how to climb in this particular game. You have to learn how to like jump from one point to another, even just like running around does not feel the same as other games. Mm-hmm. So I think that it is a case of, if you grew up with the original and you were able to master the original version, then you don't really find all that much of a fault when it comes to controlling this this character like in the world. And I played it this time on the original control setup, and I did fine. But I think it's the case of like, was it something that you grew up with originally? I think that happens in the same way with like Resident Evil. I loved the original remake that was on GameCube back in 2002, and
absolutely,
that's how I grew to play Resident Evil. So when people complain about how the controls are really hard to play in that game, I'm like, well, what are you talking about? That's how you played Resident Evil. Like that,
right?
the camera's fixed and your character does not move relative to the camera. Your character moves forward, backward, left or right. And like you can't orient yourself to control the character based on where the camera is because it shifts.
Yeah.
And it's like watching security camera footage, or it's like watching a movie cut together and the camera just like jumps from one point to another and you have to keep running in the same direction. So don't pay attention to where the camera is. But like in this particular game, like that's not the same kind of control style, but that level of difficulty when it comes to playing this game is still there. And, you know, if you want to, climb the Colossus and then jump from one handhold to another, you can't just press the jump button. You have to hold it down. So he does like this wind up of a jump, and that's how far he's going to jump up to the next handhold or whatever. But, you know, I feel like I need somebody else to explain to me why the controls are difficult to use, because I've never been there, but I understand that they are difficult, and I don't really know how they are.
Right. And that's my thing. That's what I was, I guess, trying to get at, which is that I'm not, again, trying to put anyone in a weird spot and being like, oh, get good or anything like that. It's nothing like that. I just truly didn't have that experience. So it's hard for me to sort of empathize with that feeling, at least as in the way that it's used most commonly when it's talking about this game. People say, well, I can't play this game, or I won't beat this game because the controls are too bad. Right?
Yeah.
That's the part that I can't connect with. If there's a different reason you bounce off the game, and I'm sure there are many, because this is a very untraditional game in a lot of ways, like I can get behind that. But saying that it's the controls, I've never really understood. Quickly, though, before I forget, I wanted to touch on your point about the camera, because I found that to be the case in this game, too. Much like Resident Evil, there's an illusion of control of the camera.
Yeah.
But you actually, you can, let me be clear, you can use the right stick to move the camera and pan it around, and you get some of these amazing, gorgeous shots of the Forbidden Land, and you're riding around on horseback. It's incredible. But if you release that stick, the camera has a tendency to correct itself. It really wants to be in a certain position at all points in time. And so what you're actually doing with the right stick is sort of fighting the camera off. It's almost like you're resisting the pull that the game normally has to frame these moments for you. And once I realized that, and once I realized that I could trust the camera to show me what I needed to see, that also became easier, because I stopped trying to auto-correct it and fight it and just let the game guide me as it was supposed to.
Yeah. The game itself is really trying to be cinematic. You know, they turn the camera a very specific way for you to, you can still see your character climbing this giant thing, but it's trying to frame it in a very specific way to make it look like it is something that is like artistic, and it's very specifically there for you to see it a certain way. So that's one point that I think makes it quite a beautiful game to play. Just in terms of like an art piece that, you know, if someone were to tell you that like video games are not art, this is the game to show them and say like, no, they really can be. You need to see this.
Yeah.
You also said earlier just a little bit about what the story is, where
sure.
this guy is riding on a horse into this canyon, and you don't really get a good look at it, but he's got something on the back of this horse as well. And then after that initial intro, he gets down into this giant castle that has a bridge connecting to it that is the only way into this area. But he crosses the bridge, gets into the castle, and in this castle there is a large cathedral area that has an altar, and he lays down what looks like a body on the altar, and it's a young girl or a woman, and she's dead for some odd reason. You don't know why. And you also don't know who she is. She could be his lover, she could be a sister, a stranger, whatever. But
Right.
then there are voices that come out from the light in the top of this cathedral area that tell him they will bring her back to life if he ventures out into the nearby land and finds 16 different colossi. And I have a hard time saying colossi and not just Colossus, but that's
me too.
the plural. The plural of Colossus is colossi. But
Yeah.
if you venture out into the land and slay these 16 colossi, you will complete this ritual that will bring her back to life. And so like that's all you have. And they also tell you a couple of other things, like, you can hold your sword up in the sunlight and it acts like a compass that tells you where the next one is. But that's it. That's all they tell you. And then you just kind of have to get up on your horse and ride out toward where you think the first one is.
Mm.
Riding through this land is, I find it to be quite beautiful and pristine just to look at, but it is also just so barren. There are some small signs of life. There are trees all over the place, but you'll see every once in a while, you'll see like a small lizard running around, or a hawk, or there's like one spot that has turtles. So you might be able to find
turtles.
that. But
I only knew that from going for the trophy
Yeah.
for interacting with them. Yeah.
but like there's just nothing happening in this world. And so as you're writing, there's also no music at all. So as you write around, you're supposed to just sit and think about who you are and what you're doing here and what it's all for. And
Right.
we'll start talking a little bit more about that in a little bit. But just the fact that there's a lot of that addition by subtraction here. When it comes to the environment that's been made, it becomes something that's quite beautiful. What did you think about just like how there's not much here?
Yeah, it's a really well said point. Again, to tie back to that addition by subtraction, it ties into the design of the game world in such a beautiful way, in that the barrenness is contrasted with these little pockets of life.
Yeah.
And there's almost always something worthwhile in those pockets for you to find as the player. You talked about some of those lizards. There's certain ones, it took me a long time to realize this. There's certain ones that have a blue tail. And if you kill them, the game never tells you to do this. If you do it, you will get a little bit of stamina. And in the same way, there are these trees that are scattered around the world, but there's some of these trees that have fruit in them. And the fruit is pretty innocuous, right? It's it's an orangish kind of green color. It almost even blends in sometimes with the lighting in the world. It's not like it sticks out like a sore thumb. But if you are curious and you go, hey, this is weird, this tree looks a little bit different, you go over to it and you shoot this fruit down, you get some health back.
Yeah.
Or get some permanent boost, I should say, to your health. Again, the game never tells you to do this, doesn't tell you how to do it. That is sort of a really beautiful thing, I think, in how much it trusts the player to discover these things on your own. To tie it a little bit back to controls, right? There's a way that you can make your horse sprint. There's a way that you can do a quick turn on your horse. You can stand up on your horse when it's galloping. You can pet your horse.
Yeah.
None of these things are ever told to you. And I don't think I figured out that I could pet aggro until like my third playthrough. And I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck? Yeah. And I just found that to be really, really incredible. Those moments when you're just with aggro, just riding from one point to the next, or even maybe you get distracted by something in the distance that you see and you want to explore. I found those to be just as impactful as the actual fights themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that they're really, really well done. And then quickly, before I forget about the basic conceit of the story, it's important that in the beginning, you don't really know who you are or why you're there, but you can tell that whatever is talking to you through the light is surprised that you're there. And they're also saying, I'm not going to guarantee that I can bring this person back, but because you have this sword, which is apparently some special sword, it's highly likely, but it's going to cost you something. And I think that it's important that they tell you right at the offset that there's going to be a price to pay for this, even if it is doable.
Yeah.
So right away, you're like, well, it's not going to be as cut and dry as I thought it was. So I thought that was really an interesting thing as well.
Yeah. Going back to you talking about the lizards and the fruit, I got to confess, I didn't know that you could do that until after my first playthrough. So I played the entire game without upgrading anything. That was like way back in 2005, where I didn't understand that you could do stuff outside of what you're told. So
right,
I was just a young kid. What did I know?
Yeah, sure.
But like, we should talk about some of these fights, because eventually you do stumble upon your first Colossus, and you have to first climb up into the area that it's in, and it's just kind of walking around minding its own business, and then sees you and starts to attack you with a giant club that's like the size of a car. But this thing is this giant humanoid creature that is made out of stone and fur, and you have to find some way to climb it and then find its weak point, that is usually a glowing blue sigil somewhere on the body, and then stab it with your sword, and that will kill the Colossus. These are almost like puzzles in themselves, because you have to figure out, what is this thing doing, and how do I find a way to start climbing something on it? Because you can climb the furry spots, but you can't climb something smooth and stone. But there are intended ways for you to get up there. That's one thing that I love about these, is that these fights are almost like puzzles in themselves, kind of like how the old Punch-Out games were puzzles, because you had to like learn their moves and then figure out what the best opening was to make your move and start fighting back.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the core. If you're talking about what the gameplay is in the game, the riding between and the riding around in the world is relatively hands-off in some sense, in that you can just set aggro to gallop. And again, aggro will guide you kind of along the path that you're on.
Yeah.
And the camera will do that as well. Took me a while to realize that I didn't actually need to steer as much with the left stick as I thought I did. So that was interesting, but you're totally right that these puzzles are really where the gameplay comes in. And I think really the primary example of skill expression in the game comes in the routes that you take on these Colossus themselves, and how you use the physics engine in the game, which is wonky as hell, to your benefit or sometimes to your detriment.
Yeah.
And the game does a really good job of telling you that. So the first Colossus you do that you mentioned, you can get onto it in a relatively straightforward way. But beginning with the second one, they kind of throw that out the window. And I think the game teaches you early on that, hey, it's not going to be able to, you're not just going to be able to run up and grab onto these things every single time.
Yeah.
In fact, you're going to have to use your environment to your advantage very heavily. So that's very cool too.
Yeah, or somehow affect it in some way so that it falls down, and then you can get on a spot to climb before it gets back up. That becomes like the creative part about puzzle solving, is like, well, there's a glowing weak spot on its foot, and if you shoot the foot with an arrow, then it might kneel down for a second, and you can get up on it. Or, later on, there's like some other action that you can take that causes it to bring part of its body down to the ground, and then like you suddenly ride its hand up into the air, and then there are other things you have to do to make it so you can climb over to its back, or whatever it is that you're trying to do next. But while you're doing this, this is when the music kicks in for all of these fights, and the music itself becomes its own character, I feel like, where it adds so much to how grandiose these fights feel when they're grandiose already. It adds such a weight to all of these that feel like they are a blockbuster, that it just wouldn't be the same without them. I had the soundtrack way back after I played the game the first time, and I just pirated it from somewhere, but because like you couldn't find it anywhere else. So I found it online and I was just like, cool, I'll burn a copy of that, threw it in my car while I was driving around. And then my sister borrowed my car one day and asked like, what movie was that soundtrack from? That sounded amazing. And I said, oh, that was a game. That was Shadow of the Colossus. So
he's like, what?
That's not a game. What?
Yeah.
But yeah, like, that's how impactful the music is. It is become its own character in the game almost. So it really adds a lot.
I totally agree. And I also have been listening to it on the side since I've been playing this game the last couple weeks. Really, really enjoying it. And I'll have it on at work sometimes while I'm working on something. And Daryl will walk into the room and be like, what is that? I'm like, it's Shadow of the Colossus. He's like, oh my gosh, it sounds awesome. I'm like, yeah, you got to go play it. I've been
really
trying
is.
to get him to play this game. So if you talk to him, anyone, push him to play this game. Yeah, the music is really great. In particular, I'm a big fan of sort of the opening theme that plays in the game, even when you start it up. And some of the quieter themes are very impactful, just as much as the sort of larger bombastic ones during the boss fights. And one of the things that's really striking about the soundtrack, there are many things, but one of the main things is how somber it is. Right? I find it very sad in some ways.
It is.
I don't know if you felt the same.
There's not really, well, it kind of goes with the rest of the game where there's not many happy points for this story, but you know, that's why it feels kind of somber. But like also those quieter moments where it's leading up to a Colossus, or you've just started trying to figure out how to fight this thing, and you know that you might be like swimming through this lake and there is like this giant thing that is flying over above the lake, and you know, the music is just kind of slowly creeping along, but it is fitting perfectly with what's happening. But you're right. At no point is it actually very happy. And like some of the quieter moments where like the softer music pieces are a bit more somber because of the tone that this game is taking.
And I think that goes for the sound design in general, which is incredible, just like the soundtrack. You know, hearing aggro gallop is a wonderful sound. I love, in particular, you go over these bridges very frequently in the game that take you from the starting area to the north, and you see and hear the waves lapping up onto the shore below you. It's an awesome sound. And probably my favorite sound is when you just happen to find yourself in, I think there's only 2 areas that I know of, but there are a couple areas that are more forested and densely populated with trees. And you hear the soundscape there of the birds and the insects and the water and everything. And you can just be like, wow, this is awesome. It's very, very immersive.
I don't know how else to describe this kind of environment that it puts you in, other than like, this is video game location comfort food. This time around, like I played this game through like probably in a total, I've lost count, but I think it's around 10 times. Because I've platinumed both versions that are on the one on PlayStation 3 and the one on PlayStation 4. I played through the PS2 version so many times before then, but there are certain things that I know by heart about the geography of this land that make me feel at home playing through it. And this time around, I said, hey, I've never played through the mirrored version of this game. Why don't I try that?
Whoa.
So, like, there's the option at the beginning of the game that if you've played it enough times, you can play through the mirrored version where it just mirrors everything, and the entire world is just opposite. You know, everything east to west is now west to east, whatever.
Oh my gosh, that
But
would throw me off so much.
it, like, knowing it so well, I played through it and I killed the first Colossus, and I thought I need to switch back because it does not feel right here. I don't like this, and I am missing what it was like in the other direction.
Yeah.
So
Oh, man.
there is a certain point of comfort of just knowing what this world is and taking it in every once in a while. It is definitely a vacation spot that you can visit digitally. So, do you have any favorite locations in this game?
That's great. That's a really great question, actually. Yes, I do have some favorite locations. One of them I alluded to already. When you are heading north from the shrine, where you start each of your runs, you can either go on the west or the east side, and there's a bridge that takes you over this gap where the ocean is and stuff. The left side bridge, or the west bridge, I always love riding over. I find that to be one of my favorite spots in the game. I talked about the waves being there, and it's just incredible. Another one that I found more recently is in the very south of the map. I think it's the southwest. The plateaus start to get a lot more jagged and vertically sort of mixed up. And there's this one spot where you can find a shrine at the very edge of the map that's facing towards the south, towards the ocean. And I thought that spot is incredibly beautiful as well. And then the last one I'll say, because I could go on for a long time about this. The last one that I'll say is probably the area where you are fighting, let's say well, I don't want to say the name of the Colossus. You're fighting a Colossus, and you see a massive waterfall area before you go in to fight them.
Oh, yes.
And it's this huge amount of water dumping down from this lake to this lower area, and there's cliffs and trees around it and stuff, and you can see it pooling, and you can hear it, and it sounds incredible.
Yeah.
So I think those three spots are probably my favorite.
Yeah, the ambient noise is just amazing in this game. Like, going back to talking about the forest. So, one of my favorites, and you mentioned that forest that's in the kind of the southwest area of the shrine.
Yes.
But if you go through that forest and kind of venture through it, keep going west through that, you'll come to a cliff that overlooks a lake or a swamp area. And this is like one of those spots where in the land, they could have fit another Colossus in here, but they didn't. Another instance of addition by subtraction. But there are spots in this game where they could easily fit another 10 Colossus and you wouldn't bat an eye.
Yeah.
That's fine. But they don't. And they just let you take in these beautiful areas sometimes. So this one in particular, there is a cliff that overlooks a very shallow lake that you can just walk in ankle high water. But it has a giant tree in the bottom of this canyon as well that is just surrounded by water. And if you jump down into that water, like you'll take damage because it's not deep at all. But if you find a way down into this canyon that has this lake as a floor, you can see there's mist rising off of the water. And it's one of those spots where it's just like, oh my God, like I cannot believe they put this in here. But
that's incredible. I need to go find this. I don't know. I think I may have encountered the area you're talking about, but the context for it was I shot some fruit off this tree and it fell and I couldn't find it. And I'm like, I think it fell all the way down to that lake, but I don't know how to get there. So I just left it. And I was like, all right, I'm out. but I think that's the area you're talking about.
Yeah. So there's that. There's the Umbral Glade, which is a very specific save shrine area that is up in the northwest, right before Colossus number 14. But it's not even a canyon or a valley that you have to venture into. You can just pass by it. But if you stop in there, it reminds me very much of driving through the Columbia Gorge outside of the Portland area. And if you've ever been in this area, it is like you're driving through this massive gorge and there are mountains on both sides of you as you're driving along. And we did that just a couple of weeks ago. My wife and I did, and I got that same sense of like going through a place that is definitely not someplace I'm used to and is not meant for someone my size. This is
Yeah.
definitely someplace that will that will dwarf you when you just look at it. So it is quite beautiful, and that's what the Umbral Glade kind of feels like. I love that spot as well. Those are some of my favorites, but we should get back to talking about the actual Colossus fights, because
Yeah, let's do it.
what happens when you eventually kill one of them? And this will happen after your first fight, but
Right.
The Colossus topples over and falls to the ground, and then at the spot that you've been like stabbing at it, out comes these tendrils of black shadow, or whatever they are, and they fly around in the air for a few seconds, and then they like kind of grab onto your character, and he absorbs them in a sense, and then falls down to the ground unconscious.
There's this really sad music that plays too, right? To get back to the audio, immediately you start to go, did I do the right thing? Was I supposed to do that? Because when those tendrils get you too, it makes this incredible, like, impactful sound when they first hit your body.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to try to replicate it because it's going to sound goofy as hell, but you know what I mean. and then you seemingly die and respawn, right? So you're like, wait a minute. What? It's a very confusing initial thing, but it starts to become part of the rhythm and the core gameplay loop of the game.
And that like this is probably a bad thing. There's in no way this is a good thing, but you also, like, right before you wake up, you see a shadow standing over your character's body. By the way, you don't know this, like the game never tells you this, but his name is Wander. And like you only know that I know that because I looked it up online, but before Wander wakes up, there is a shadow standing over him. And after you've killed a second Colossus, there are 2. And then 3 after the third. So every time you kill a Colossus, there are more shadowy figures watching over him before he wakes up in the shrine again. That is another clue foretelling that, like, what he's doing is not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah. And who are these people? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get into, I have a theory on it, and I think we'll save it for later.
Yeah.
But I found that to be really confusing. And one of the things that also can happen is, as you seemingly absorb those tendrils you mentioned, and before you respawn in the temple, or the shrine, you go through this black tunnel, black and white tunnel. And every once in a while, you will hear someone. And I found that really striking as well. In my mind, I thought you were hearing the girl who you were trying to bring back to life.
Yeah.
That's what I took that to mean. But that also is a very kind of interesting moment, because not all of those things that you hear from seemingly that person sound positive either. Yeah. Sometimes they sound like they're in pain, or they're crying, or they're remorseful, and you're like, wait, what? Again, very confusing.
Because, like, you mentioned, you hear her voice, and it could be her voice, it could be anyone's voice, but it's someone's voice, and the language that's being spoken in this game is made up. So there's no way to really understand what they're saying. They do have subtitles every once in a while for when there is, like, one of these like higher voices talking to you, but you never really, like, know what's being said. Is it her voice? Yeah. And is she telling you to stop? Is she telling you to keep going? Or, well, like, she could be telling you anything. So,
right. Are you hearing her when she was dying, like before she died? Like, I again, it kind of leads to that beautiful ambiguity that the game leaves you with, So yeah, very interesting.
We were like, I was on the couch, and more ambiguity, but, like, my wife, like, she said, so are these things just wandering the place, and like you're showing up and killing them, and like they're not evil, are they? And I said, no, they're probably not evil. They have some sort of dark spirit inside of them, but are they're just, like, containing these things. Like, the dark spirit was imprisoned inside of it. So, they're not necessarily evil. And then, like, I imagine that this is what it feels like to be on a whaling ship in the 1800s. Like, because you see, like you've encountered this massive, beautiful thing that does not mean you any ill will. And what you do is kill it.
Yeah.
that's, again, it goes back to the thing of like, am I doing the right thing? Or am I the bad guy in this? And
Oh,
again, that's at least what I start to think about as I'm riding across the desert to Colossus number 6 or 7.
yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, is this something that I should keep doing? So I read a book one time that was talking about whether or not you are the bad guy in certain games. And this was one of them. And he was talking about another game where people did not like the ending. And they said like, well, the credits are rolling and you can just assume that the game is over, or you can actually continue playing as your character while the credits roll and go take this other action. You don't have to, but the game lets you. So it's your choice right now whether or not you want to continue doing this. You can just say that Wander decides to give up, gets on aggro, and leaves the shrine and goes across the bridge back out the way he came. That is how you can say that, the game ends, he decides that this is not worth it, and that's the better thing to do. But
I mean, it's so tough because we don't know,
Yeah.
right? I think the motivation becomes a huge thing here. And I guess that's the question the game is trying to get you to think about, which is it okay to do a bad thing if it's for a good reason? Right.
Yeah.
Which is not a new question. It's been asked for many, many eons, but it is an important question to ask. And we don't know the context of how this person died, why they're dead, what this land is even, or who this entity is that you're interacting with. We only really have the actual voice itself as a narrator for us throughout the adventure. And obviously they are pushing you to kill these Colossus.
Yeah.
And you're getting a mutual sort of symbiotic relationship out of it because you can potentially bring this person back to life. But again, who is this person? Is that person a dictator? Is it, someone who was sacrificed for the right reason? Was it someone who you just don't know? And so it's really hard to say. But certainly if you read between the lines, I would agree with you that I think you're the villain in this.
Yeah.
In the way the game tries to signal that to you many times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And that's, that is where like you can say like, well, like he's doing bad things, but is he doing them for a noble reason? So, the other games have tackled this. Like the best one I can think of is both Last of Us games.
Yeah.
They have characters that keep doing things that you don't want them to do, but they keep doing them anyway. And then because you're playing as them, these actions that you feel like they are doing are like something bad, you're culpable in their actions as well, because you're taking part in something bad as well. So that's a very unique feeling that video games can convey, and not many of them do it well, but this one does.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Last of Us is the game I thought of first when you started saying, when you were bringing up that idea, especially the first game, I think. And maybe one of the more key differences is just that it is possible to stealth through a lot of the areas in The Last of Us, whereas in this game, it is impossible to progress without absorbing some feeling of guilt at what you're doing.
Yeah.
By the very nature of trying to beat the game and get through it, you have to do these things. And because there are no enemies and smaller mobs or anything to fight, it is really just these bosses. Just the very act of completing the game again is how you have to do it. It's so interesting.
There are other like extra things that they've thrown into this version of the game. There are the time trials, which are in the original version as well, but they're slightly made easier in this version. I know that you've been playing a few of those.
Hell yeah.
You're
absolutely loved them.
Yeah.
I've beaten it on hard and on normal for the
nice. And so like then you get like these special items that will let you find all the lizards in the world or all the fruit. There's even a parachute that you can get that will make it so if you fall off the Colossus, you're fine.
It's awesome. I love that thing. Yeah.
But you finished all the time trials. That's pretty awesome. There's also like a speed run trophy that you've been going for. Have you earned that speed run yet?
I actually did. Yeah, I earned it on my second playthrough ever. So I took your advice. I played through the game on normal, and then I played through the game on hard, got that speedrun trophy, and then jumped into time attack. And what I found was pretty funny is that after I completed the time attacks and went back to playing the game normally, I had trouble remembering how to get to the Colossus. Because I was like, wait a minute, I'm just so used to just jumping in with time attack right now and just being in the boss fight. I actually can't remember how to get there. So, and now, of course, I'm on my 5th playthrough of the game, so I've started to kind of put it together. But the time trials were really fun, I thought. I think it's a great way of really encapsulating the spirit of this game, which I think is very pro speedrunning.
Yeah.
This game invites you to try to speedrun it, invites you to try to get through it quicker and optimize. And we talked about Resident Evil before. This game and Resident Evil feel very similar in that regard, where your first playthrough is going to be the most experimental, the most time intensive, and every subsequent run after that, you're shaving off minutes at a time until it gets down to this probably 1.5 to 2 hour, very tight experience that you can have.
Yeah.
And I really like that.
Yeah. I feel like that I know it so well. I've played this so many times that I sometimes when I'm having trouble sleeping, I start to list off in my head where each Colossus is.
Oh,
and
nice.
Since this time around, I hadn't played this in a couple of years. And even like 6 months ago, I was still doing that if I was having trouble sleeping. I'd be like, okay, Colossus number 1 is directly to the south. Number 2 is down on the beach. And like I would start doing that. And then I would also like recite strategies in my head of what it took to take each one down. So that's how well I know this game. It's kind of scary. But
yeah, that's awesome.
The time trials, the time trials will also teach you like how to take them down really fast. That's really cool. They've also added in
great items, like you said too.
Oh yeah,
I forgot about that.
Yeah,
you can get. I'm currently wearing the shaman mask, the shaman robe. Like I'm using all the buffed up stuff. You even get this thing eventually. I can't remember which unlock it is, but the Queen Sword, which I think is a little Easter egg to an older game, but it basically kills each weak point in one hit.
On
the Colossus, so it makes it so quick when you do it later. So very fun.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you can't use them for the time trials themselves. That would be a lot easier. But
I know, I thought you could at first. When I first tried the time of trial on hard, I was expecting to have all my stats, from the first 2 playthroughs, and I was like, okay, here we go. And then the first Colossus, you're back to just that original stamina circle, and I was like, wait a minute, what? And like, this is gonna be harder than I thought.
Yeah. On the original PS2 version, you could get yourself powered up so much that stamina circle would take up 1/4 of the entire screen. But at that point, it would because it would obscure your vision so much. What they would do is they would just fade it out. And so you wouldn't even see the circle. Then when it starts to shrink little by little, it starts to fade into the screen. So that's how they do it. It's really, really cool effect. This time though, it's just a straight bar that goes across the bottom of the screen. Like that's another like small change they had. They also added in collectible coins that you can find throughout the world that then when you've collected all 78 of them or however many they are, then you get like
there's 78?
It's ridiculous. Yes.
Oh, I feel stupid. I think I found 2. I found 2 of them. I think.
Man.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And you get like a special sword, but you're the amount of stamina that it takes to reach some of these because you have to climb so high, it's really not worth collecting for just the advantage of having that sword. So that's not one that I recommend going for, but there's that little extra added in. You can get yourself to be powerful enough to climb the shrine and reach the top, but there are a couple of coins up there, and by the time that you're powerful enough to get there, you've maxed out your climbing stats. So it's just like, well, there are coins up there that you can get for an unlock for a sword that probably won't help you out that much because you're already maxed out. So really.
Yeah, at that point in the game, it's just for the sake of it's probably meant for those people who have such a reverence and love for the original game that this is something new for them to try to find and explore. And I mean, it's really cool. They make this really interesting audio cue when you're near them too. It sounds like a little bit of music playing.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I even knew what it was. And then I saw it on the ground and I'm like, can I pick this up? I walk over it, nothing happens. I was like, okay, I'll try to bend down and pick it up. And then I grabbed it, but nothing else happened. I was like, okay, I guess I got whatever that is. I'm moving on. I found the first one I found was next to that barrel in the woods.
Yeah.
Which I think is and I got a trophy for finding the barrel, and I was like, oh, sick. I'm very happy selfishly that there is no trophy to collect all these coins.
Yeah, that is really
I could have
nice.
easily seen them doing that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Did you also use the photo mode that they've included in this?
I have tinkered with it a little bit. Yeah. I've also just taken quite a few screenshots just with the quick button press on the PS5. And riding around.
I got so into this photo mode the first time the game released. I took over 100 different setup shots for this.
Oh, nice.
And I loved it that much. It also has a great suite of filters for you to create different looking shots for it. So that one area that I mentioned earlier with the mist coming off the lake, I had Wander standing in that and then took a filter and made it look like it was nighttime. And so you have like this night shot of the mist rising off the lake next to a tree. It's amazing. So that's one that I really love. Yeah.
Now I'm just wishing that there was a day-night cycle. I can only imagine how beautiful the starscape would be.
Oh, yes.
In this area, right? Like, oh, that'd be so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good reminder for me to mention that there is a photo mode challenge happening over in the Discord right now for anyone listening that happens to have Shadow of the Colossus. You can submit a photo over there, and I'm going to be picking a winner at the end of January. So, that's
hell yeah,
that's coming up. So really, really exciting. But is there anything else that we should talk about regarding the game in general?
I think we've danced around it a little bit, and I would just like to formally mention that the HUD in this game is incredibly minimalistic.
Yeah.
And when you're riding around, there really isn't anything displayed on the screen. Until you take damage or are actively using your stamina, those bars themselves aren't even on the screen.
Yeah.
So it's a very stripped down approach, and it helps you focus on just what you're looking at and the actual active riding or whatever you're doing at the time. I found that to be a really, really smart design choice.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it's not directly related, just so I don't forget about it, I would like to mention the architecture in the game, which is incredibly weird, and I absolutely love it. It seems to have so many different mixes of cultures in these ruined cities and these areas that you find.
Yeah.
In particular, there's those rings in the desert that are like hoops almost, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, what the hell is this? Yeah, go ahead.
You can as you're riding aggro, you can ride through them, and it's like, this is really odd. I wonder, does it do anything? No, it doesn't do anything, but it's
okay. Well, thank you for clearing that up, because I was like, for like a serious 30 minutes, I was like, all right, I'm gonna try to go through these in a weird way. Maybe there's something that happens if I like go through them in the right sequence or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
But
one other thing I do like to ask anybody on the show is, how would you rate this game? Is this not worth your time? Is it a try it if you have PlayStation Plus, or you find it on sale? Or is it a shut up and take my money kind of level game?
That's a wonderful way to put it. For me, and of course, gaming is such a subjective activity, hard to say. But I can tell you, for me, shut up and take my money.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I would pay full price for this thing. There's no questions asked. I ended up getting it on sale because it's older at this point. So even if you don't have PlayStation Plus Extra, which you should have, but if you don't, you should try to get this game.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Like, it is there at the shut up and take my money level, but that's because I'm a Shadow of the Colossus stan from 2005. So I loved this game back when it first came out, and then I love this new version. there are some people that really just cannot get into the controls or the gameplay itself, but
Right.
this is an art piece that goes for a very specific direction that pulls it off incredibly well. And if you get into it, I guarantee you're going to have a great time just taking this in.
Right. And I think the thing I can say that would back you up even more so than I already have is just that I didn't play the original.
Okay,
right.
yeah.
This is my first experience with Shadow, and I still feel like it's a masterpiece.
Mhm.
I would put it it's already got a spot now in probably my top 10 games of all time.
Oh,
even
wow.
just after playing it only for about 3 weeks.
Holy shit, because you play a lot of games.
Yeah, it's been a very impactful experience for me to
Okay.
get to this game. Yeah, I've really enjoyed my time with it.
Okay, I'm so glad that you agreed to come on here and talk about it. So I'd like
Go
to
buy it. Yeah.
I'd like to ask, in a short actual books and more recommendations of a book club style podcast, did you play any of the other Fumito Ueda games? I'm guessing not, because this is your first time playing Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Okay.
I have not played any of the other ones, and I'm really bummed that at least on native hardware, I don't have access to Eco. I think that game looks really interesting, and I know it was very influential on games that came after it in the industry, including things like Dark Souls, which I absolutely love as well.
Yeah.
So it's a very it's an area that I'm really eager to explore more of. I have watched speedruns for Eco and for The Last Guardian, and for Shadow of the Colossus, obviously now, but no, I haven't played any of the other ones. I do have The Last Guardian sitting in my cart. I just have been toying around with whether or not I actually want to pull the trigger on it.
Yeah, I have not played The Last Guardian, which is the third game, but I did play Eco, and it's not as incredible as Shadow of the Colossus, but it's still something that is quite lovely. It again, like, a lot of addition by subtraction. There's not a lot going on as far as HUD or exposition goes for a story, but you're just a boy that is guiding a girl or a princess through a castle and trying to save her from an evil queen. It's hard to describe and explain. It's a lot easier to just see it and play it. And then Last Guardian I haven't tried it yet, so that's another one that's on my list to try out if I can find the time.
I just don't know. From a trophy perspective, I'm a trophy hunter predominantly on the PlayStation ecosystem. So looking at the trophy guide for The Last Guardian it's so mixed for me. I'm unclear of how hard it is. You know, like you go in the comments, there's some people, the controls suck. You can't get the beast to do what you want it to do ever. Oh my gosh, this is intolerable. And then you see other people like 10 out of 10, masterpiece, the most, I'm like, I can't get a read on how I'm supposed to feel about this game. I think in reality, I'll probably end up picking it up just out of sheer curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know when I'll get to it. But at some point, I would like to play it.
Yeah, I feel like the same way. So are there other games that you can think of where you're climbing and fighting giants of this scale that are really good?
Oof. Man. It's funny. I feel like I should be able to tell you more examples very quickly, but I really can't. I think there are games that have elements of it. For example, hunting the white whale in Assassin's Creed Black Flag, or encountering the giant squid in that game and the fun Easter egg that's there. There are moments that sort of mirror that. And then I think that there are games that obviously rely heavily on the climbing aspect as well, but I really can't think of. Let me put it this way. There are certainly other games that are boss rushes, which is kind of what you could condense this game down to.
Yeah.
But there's none that I can think of that do it with this sense of scale other than this game.
Yeah. Yeah. The only one that I could think of that did it well was Castlevania Lords of Shadow. And that one has like these three, from what I remember, there were 3 fights where there was like this giant thing that you had to climb. And it was almost like when you were climbing it, it was like playing a rhythm game where you had to specifically jump and swing around or like grab on something at a very specific time. And it did become like this puzzle, because that's what the entire level was, just you climbing a dragon or something, and then like reaching its weak point and killing it. But it would have very specific like attacks that would sweep fire across the spot you were climbing, and so you had to like dodge those at the right time. It was very, very bespoke for like a rhythm game, but instead you were this character that was climbing around, and it was pretty cool. But that was just one small part of the rest of the game, because the rest of the game plays a lot more like God of War, and then there's like these climbing points that are like Shadow of the Colossus.
I think God of War is a great shout, though. When you were just talking, I forgot to mention God of War 3 probably has some moments like that.
It does,
yeah. But again, the context of why you're doing the thing, and even the way the combat feels, is so different, right? It's so clearly like an antagonistic battle.
Yeah.
In God of War versus in Shadow, which is a very one-way affair, where it feels like a beast is just trying to get you to leave it alone, and you're trying to kill it. So it felt very different.
Yeah. Are there any games that for you have like this comfort food kind of environment? Like I described, like this place I just feel nice viewing and riding around in.
Yeah, two come to mind. If you know me, if you've listened to me talk, they're not going to be surprises. One of them is Resident Evil's the Spencer Mansion. I feel very at home in. You were talking about how you can, when you're trying to go to sleep, you can navigate this world of Shadow. When I was going for the platinum in Resident Evil Remake, I before bed would run through the route in my head of how to beat the game. And I still think I could do it in probably an hour and a half, even though I haven't played the game in a long time. And I love that mansion so much, and the save rooms in there so much. So that's probably the first choice for me. And then I would say a close second to that is any and all of the Firelink shrines in the Souls series. Have a special place in my heart. The Dark Souls 3 Firelink shrine, weirdly enough, is one that I feel very strongly about. A lot of people are kind of mixed on that game, but I think the track that plays there is incredible, and it's in the space is very it's much more grand than some of the other Firelink shrines you encounter.
It's funny that you brought that up, because I just started Dark Souls 3 last week.
Oh, okay, so you know exactly what I'm talking about then. That's right. Yeah. No, I really love 3. Just real quickly, I think it's probably my favorite of the Dark Souls games, but that's a very uncommon opinion. So
yeah okay,
be curious what you have to say as you go on.
I'll update you with my progress, but before we go into a spoiler discussion on Shadow of the Colossus, remind us where can we find your material, Colin?
Sure. Yeah. So you can find me pretty much on any platform at CK Present. That's my username, pretty much everywhere, including over on Xbox. I'm not PlayStation exclusively. And then I have a YouTube channel as well, CK Present. And then the show for Trophy Talk, it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a Trophy Talk podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So for our spoiler discussion for Shadow of the Colossus, we're going to do two things. First, we have to talk about this ending. And second, we are going to, because I feel like the Colossus fights themselves are a bit spoilery if we talk about them, we're going to break down our top 5 Colossus fights each.
Let's go.
Let's start. Let's talk about the ending first of all. Like, you've killed your 16th Colossus, and again, like, these tendrils come out of the Colossus and then get absorbed into Wander, and he collapses, wakes up in the cathedral, and just then, I guess, like, the high priest that was forbidding anyone from coming to this land shows up with an escort, and this escort of soldiers start to attack Wander and want to, like, put him out of his misery, because by now he has started to decay into like an undead zombie, but is still like coherent.
Yeah, your skin looks
It's
more ashen and
yeah.
gray, and I've noticed in subsequent playthroughs that you can actually see this happening earlier than I thought.
Yeah, it happens over time. Like after like the fifth one, I'm thinking to myself, he's looking kind of pale.
Yeah, same. I didn't know if it was just like the areas that I was going, the lighting was a little bit different
Yeah.
later in the game, and that's why it looked that way. But no, you actually can see it happen in real time, which is
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah. So like one of the soldiers shoots him with an arrow, and then that causes him to start to bleed the black substance that he was absorbing all this time. One of the other soldiers stabs him with the sword, and that presumably kills him. But then he just kind of grows into this giant shadowy Colossus, and you play as one of the Colossus as this like final fight. And you fight the soldiers that are trying to attack Wander now. This is one of those like dream, like power trip scenarios where it's like, oh, great. Now I get to be the giant thing fighting the small thing. And you realize like how difficult it was for these giants to try and kill Wander, because he's this tiny thing that just can kind of like weave around its feet and like dodge its giant swings, whatever. But like the soldiers and the high priest escape, and they like throw the sword into the fountain at the entrance to the shrine, and that opens up a portal that starts to suck Wander in. And that's just the end of Wander. And the heartbreaking part about that is that you have control of him the whole time you're like sliding towards the portal, and you can grip the stairs as he's like being pulled in and hold on for as long as the stamina bar will let you. And my wife was watching this moment, and I said, like, she's just like, so you're just going to hold on? And I said, it feels very wrong to just let go. Like, it doesn't feel like this is something that he would do. But eventually, either you have to let go, or your stamina bar is just going to run out, and you get sucked into the portal and disappear.
Right.
That's it for Wander. So it's kind of heartbreaking for that to be the end. But then,
or is it?
But then the young woman at the altar wakes up, and she's alone. Nobody's there. We also didn't talk about what happens to Aggro.
Poor Aggro, dude.
This is like,
I can't.
This is one of those where, like, the first time I saw it, I almost cried, because I was like, no, my best friend, as you're approaching the 16th fight, you have to cross a bridge, and it starts to crumble while you're riding Aggro. And he lunges forward and he like bucks you off of the horse, off of himself, and throws you toward the safety of solid ground while the bridge is crumbling, and he falls down into the water and presumably dies. And like, this is another point where like the music really makes an impact, but there's tons of YouTubers out there who have videoed their reaction of seeing Wander die for the first time. It's heartbreaking. This one was like a loss of a big character for me.
I mean, it's your only companion in the whole game, really. So and such a faithful steed she is. I believe it's a female, actually. For
it is
Aggro.
a girl, yes, yeah.
It is a girl, yeah, and she's always there at the shrine after you get teleported back, after you kill these colossi. So there's certainly some sort of a bond between you and this horse. I mean, that's a big part of the game, and it's a big part of sort of like the lore as well. I feel like whoever these people are, this society, they have their horse, and they are extremely bonded to their horse, and this is what it feels like. So,
and this
it's
being
a really sad moment.
Yeah. But like, this being the only other character in the game, of course you're going to feel terrible, because she's been with you the whole way through. She's been with you for the whole journey. And for her to sacrifice herself at the end of this it was heartbreaking. But then after everything happens with the high priest and his escort coming in and killing Wander, he gets sucked into the portal, the girl wakes up, and then Aggro limps back into the shrine. And
Yeah.
that's amazing because like she's always been returning to the shrine after every Colossus fight. And so she does this last time, even though like she didn't see like what happened to Wander afterwards. She just knows that this is the place that she comes back to.
Mm-hmm.
And so she and the
Comes
young,
back looking for you,
yeah,
presumably.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah.
But like she and the young woman get up off the altar and limp toward the pond, like the fountain where there was the portal, and what's there is a small baby that has horns now. This is like one of those things where like you can interpret like this in many different ways, but I think for me, like how I interpret it, at least after viewing it this time, was that this baby is the reincarnation of both Wander and the demons that were called the Dorman, the shadowy figures. They have now melded into one, and this is the first horned boy that has been created in this land. And eventually in Eco, there is like the character that you're playing as is a horned boy that has been brought to a castle and then left there possibly because he has horns, and the people fear him as like this demon creature. And so like this is the first horned boy that we get. But that's kind of the small link to Eco and one of the other games. But
weird. That just totally shattered my theory, which I'll tell you, I guess, just because it seems like the right place to do it. And I knew that about Eco, right? But in my mind, the way that you described it chronologically, I think makes more sense that this would be the first horn boy that we see later persecuted in Eco.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I was going, okay, in Eco, there's these boys, these horned, I guess, boys or girls that are brought to this castle and they're kind of sealed away in these like tombs. And I sort of assumed that the Colossi were actually these horned boys or girls that were imbued with a piece of the spirit of Dormine, because they broke him up a lot like Voldemort in the Horcrux. They broke him up into these pieces and then they mutated and became these giant Colossi. But because their spirits are still that of the whoever they were originally, they're not harmful, they're not they're not aggro, they're not very they don't mean you any harm. They're just confused in these sort of like mutated things. And so that's why when you killed the Colossi, you saw this shadowy figure standing over you every time.
Yeah.
I thought that was like the essence of that, which was some person.
So, that makes a lot of sense too. That's really good.
But now I just feel extra confused.
No.
I have no idea.
According to the internet, though, this is technically a prequel to Eco. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly how to interpret this, but that's just what happens at the end. That's all I can say.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too because you see Aggro start this slow. It's so sad that she has to limp during this whole scene. Like, can we just? I understand she's got a sprained leg or something. Can she just walk normally? Because it's really it makes me feel bad. So she's walking up this giant shrine up to the top, and you find them in this garden, right? This sort of oasis at the top of the shrine that you mentioned you can get to, actually. And it's really weird because up there's life. There's birds, there's pools of water, there's fruit.
There's a deer up there too, yeah.
The deer, which you don't see in the game. And the deer sort of responds very positively to little Wander or whatever this horned boy is. And so does Aggro, and so does all the other life in this place, which really makes you start to go like, so is Dormine or is this demon actually bad? Or like, why is it sealed away? Why does this tribe have such an issue with these lands and this spirit? Like, maybe it's all wrong. Maybe actually it's a positive thing to have this in existence. I don't know. It was that part also confused me because I'm like, you'd think that the land would react negatively if it was truly a malevolent force, you know?
Again, more questions, and
ambiguity.
We just don't have answers to them. So but I do want to move into our top 5 Colossus fights. I really can't wait to break this down because I would love to just talk about some of your favorites and some of my favorites. I've got a list of top 5, and I want to count down from down to 1.
Okay.
Do you want to start us off with your 5th favorite?
Oof. All right. I can start us off with my 5th favorite. For number 5, I am going to go with Phaedra, the horse.
Oh yeah. So I liked this one. So this is number 4 in the line of Colossus that you fight. But Phaedra, the horse, she's the one that is hanging out in this grove that is also been turned into like a graveyard or like a mausoleum as well. Like there's an underground
like a bunker or something.
Yeah, there's like this underground passage that you can run into and take. And so you have to coax her to start chasing you. And then what she does is like follows you toward this tiny hole that you crawl through and then come out the other end of this tunnel. And then she's like gone looking for you. And while you're like distracting her looking through this hole, you climb up on her back.
Yeah. And she's just such a weird sort of creature as well. You know, we do have colossi that resemble other types of animals and stuff like that, which we'll get to, but she resembles, it seems feminine to me. She resembles a horse, right? And I think that that's a really interesting look. And the way that the Colossus is designed is very striking. It's also one of the only ones that there is an element of hide and seek that goes into all these fights, but this one is it's necessary for you to hide from Phaedra and to sort of sneak up on her in order to gain access to any of the vulnerable spots. The first time I fought this Colossi, I spent a good chunk just being like, I don't even know how to get onto this thing. You know, and the area is very flat. There's not a lot of elevation. I kept thinking I would have to jump off the mounds of some of these sort of entrances to this bunker. And in a way, that is kind of something you can do. The speedrun strat has you jump off aggro, and there's a weird glitch you can get onto her almost immediately, but I've never been able to pull it off. So, I found this Colossi to be really interesting, and sort of most of the battle is getting onto her. Once you're on Phaedra, it's very straightforward, and actually she doesn't shake around too much. But just a very striking design, and also very peaceful looking in this Colossi. So I don't know.
She doesn't really attack you at all. She's like curious about you, but does not. She doesn't really like try to kill you or stomp on you, whatever. She's just like curious, and that's one thing that kind of made me feel bad for killing that one. I think it's one of the first that I feel like, you know, this one doesn't really mean me any harm. So why am I doing this? Yeah.
100%.
My 5th favorite one is Gaius the Knight. He is the 3rd one that you fight. He's the guy that is really tall. To get to him, he's up on top of this giant platform that is out in the middle of a lake. And he's got this huge stick that he will swing at Wander. Every time he slams that thing into the ground, it's like a bomb going off. It is like, and then what you have to do is run up to the stick and run on top of it and then start climbing that way. You have to get him to like hit part of the arena that has like a really stiff stone on it so that part of his armor breaks off. But there's a skip that you can do where like you get him to like fling you up off of his sword and then you fly through the air and grab one of his higher points. So that's part of the skip for the time trial thing as well. But he's got 2 different weak points that you have to find on there. 3 if you're playing on the hard mode, which is pretty cool. But like this is one of those first fights where like you kind of get the idea that you can approach these weak points from multiple directions in whatever order you want. So you can hit the one on his belly first, and then you can jump to either his left or his right arm. And if you jump to his left arm, you just start climbing and you reach his head and you attack that one first. But if you hit his right arm, that's a harder one to climb onto. But that one has a weak point on it. So if you're going for that best time in your time trial, then that's the one you want to go for, but it's more of a challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Gaius was on my list as well. He was actually my number 3.
Oh, awesome.
And which is funny because he's the third Colossi, so it was not on purpose, I swear.
Yeah.
But a lot of why I liked him was because of the complexity in the skip that you talked about. I think it's incredibly satisfying to execute that skip where you use the sword to fling you up. I actually managed to do it in my last run, first try.
Wow.
And I felt so good doing it because yeah, it's really hard. It's inconsistent, right? I had to retry tons of times on the time trial to do it. And I just got lucky. And I was like, oh, that felt so cool. And the environment that you fight him in, specifically the lake that has that sort of spiral walkway for you to get to him, I find very striking as well. So I thought he was really cool. It teaches you to use your environment to your advantage in another fun way. And, the humanoid enemies are really badass looking. The humanoid colossi.
Yeah.
And so he's one of those. And yeah, he's a great fight.
Yeah. And the architecture around this fight is another one of those that, like you mentioned, it's just so weird. And so I look at this one and I just think, like, what is this place? Like, what was this? What? Because this is a giant kickstand that you have to get onto. And then it has like chains coming off of it that are like linked to stones that are in the water. It's just so, it doesn't make any sense. And that's what creates a lot of the wonder with it. One of the other things that I love about this fight is that every time I would finish it, I immediately try and run to the edge of the pedestal and try and jump off. And there was one time that I actually made that jump. And then the tendrils caught me in midair before I could even start falling. But, it again, like I said, it kind of feels wrong to not try and get away every time.
It's so funny you say that because I have been curious. I haven't looked this up, so maybe it's not possible. I've been curious about if there's any colossi that you can be at a point when you beat it that you can get on aggro quick enough and run that you can actually get away from the tendrils for a long time. I don't know, like how far they'll chase you. Will they chase you all the way across the land? Like, I have no idea how that would work. Yeah. So and like you said, the sort of pool that you find this environment in. Oh my gosh, I wish you could go deeper underwater.
Yeah.
You can dive in this game, but the visibility under there is so beautifully like obscure. You can, it's just how it would be in real life, but you just kind of want to keep following that spiral.
Yeah.
Be like, where does it go under this lake? What is going on under here?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So hit me with your number 4.
Okay. So number 4, another pretty fun one, I think, is Kuramori, the poison lizard.
Oh yeah. This one was neat.
This one is also really neat, and it has the thing that I like, which is the skill expressive way of you can one cycle this boss if you're fast enough, on normal at least, even without the time attack items. So this is one where you find yourself in this very elaborate underground Colosseum area or a jail, or again, you don't really know what the purpose of the space is, but the space is huge actually. And you can sort of be like, wow, there was a lot of activity here at some point. We don't exactly know what. But it's also very fun because this was where I learned you could whistle, which I had no idea about. But actually, if you whistle, right when you get into the arena, you're going to lure that boss right up to the top. And then once you have the parachute, like I found, that you can just jump, parachute down to the floor, shoot its legs. I mean, I find the way that you interact with the boss to be really interesting. It's one of the only ones as well that has a projectile that is not lightning or not like a fireball lightning kind of thing. It's a different sort of gaseous cloud. And it's a very unique environment and arena to fight the boss in. And again, if you execute it well, you can do it in one cycle. So I thought Kuramori was awesome.
I had no idea you could whistle it and lure it up to the top. That's amazing.
It's so weird. Yeah. It's like, what?
Been playing this game for 20 years and I had no idea. Oh my God.
Yeah, when you get in there and whistle, the music will change immediately, which signifies that it's like it's noticed you, and you can hear it start to come after you. It's like, whoa, that's cool.
That's great. And also, like the lead up to that fight, like the journey that you take is really cool because first of all, you go south, you have to like go past all these other places that you've gone to fight the Colossi, and then you go into this cave that then like takes you past a waterfall that's beautiful. And then you find it's like a small building And you go into this building and you start to travel downward, and you're just kind of like, wait, this was a very small building that you can just walk around inside this cave. And it also has a pond that has fish in it. So,
the only fish in the game, as far as I know.
Yeah. And it's a very unassuming building. So like how like you would expect to have this massive Colosseum underneath this building is really cool. So I loved going into that.
Yep. It's a great one.
Yeah. My number 4 is Avian the Eagle. And this one, is this one on your list at all?
It's number 2.
Oh, okay.
It's almost my favorite. Yeah, it's an incredible fight.
Let's skip that one and we'll come back to it.
Okay. Sure,
because I definitely want to have both of us talk about that one.
Okay, fantastic.
But like, what about number 10, Dirge? This is my number 3. Is he on your list?
Ooh, he is not. Talk to me about Dirge.
So Dirge is the sand snake guy that is in this underground desert, and he's in this like giant cave that has a sand floor, and this is like he's the closest relation that you'll get to fighting one of the graboids from the movie Tremors. But he's this like, there's something in the sand that you can see moving, and it's creating waves or like some disturbance in the sand. And what you have to do in this fight is awesome. So, and before I forget, the lead up to it, you can approach this from 2 different directions into this cave. And
I didn't realize that until I was searching for shrines, and I found the other way in, and I was like, whoa, I didn't even know you could come over here.
Like, the entrance from the west is so foreboding because it has this cave entrance, and there's a giant dead tree above the cave entrance. And it looks like there's going to be something bad in there. You know it. And so you follow the sword light that you're holding up to the sun. But like, that there's a Colossus in there, and whatever it is pretty nasty. So down in this cave in the sand, there is this snake that is traveling through the sand, and he will attack you and chase you. And to actually get him to be vulnerable, you have to ride aggro out in front of him and get him to chase you on aggro. Take your bow and arrow, turn around, and shoot him in the eye as he's chasing you.
Oh.
And then he like rams into the wall because he's been blinded. That action I thought was awesome because like, this is so badass. I love doing this. This is amazing. So
right. And one of the few, well, there's a few, I guess, but one of the few that you have to use aggro in the fight, really.
Yeah.
Like, it's required for you to bring her into the mix.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. I always got annoyed, or at least so far in my attempts, I've been annoyed because he'll crash into the wall, and I'm like, cool, I got to get over to him real fast. And then I'll get over there, and it's like, I'll try to use aggro's momentum to jump off her and land on him, and I'll miss, and then I'll like lose a bunch of time. And it's like, by the time I get onto this guy, I hit him once, and then he's like, all right, that's it. And I'm like, damn it. God damn it. Yeah. So I haven't really got my strat down for him yet.
Okay. I don't think I had any trouble getting onto him once he was up against the wall, but still, like, getting up there is difficult. And then he's got 2 different weak points. One that's like pretty close to where you can jump on him, and the other one you have to like crawl all the way over to his head and hit that one. So, it takes a lot of time to figure that one out. But
sure,
you said that number 3 on your list was Gaius the Knight. Was there anything that you wanted to add to talking about that guy up on the pedestal?
No, I don't think so. Other than, just again to reiterate how inviting that environment is when you find him. You're taking this pretty straight line path from the shrine up to the north, and then slightly to the west through this canyon. You get to that beautiful lake. There's a tree there and that's the first time I noticed that some of the trees look like they're more lush than others, which is what keyed me in to keep an eye out for fruit trees, actually, because there's a tree right on the edge of that lake. So, I just thought that was really cool. And again, we talked about the architecture piece, but, Gaius is, as far as the humanoid ones go, he's certainly up there.
Yeah. I think this is also the first fight that as you're looking for it, you lose sight of the sun. So you can't use your sword as you're looking for it. You just kind of have to get a sense that it is somewhere out there, and then you just head in that general direction. and you'll probably stumble upon it.
Yeah, that's a great call out too.
Yeah.
That you do lose that. And then there is a sword you get through time attack, I think, that works even in the shadows, or works even in the dark, which is really cool. But yeah, that's a good point.
That's part of the fun is just like kind of having faith that you're going in the right direction. So
and even if you're not, you'll find something cool.
Yeah. We're down to number 2 on your list.
Yes. So number 2 is one that you've alluded to on your list as well, which is Avian, the Eagle.
Yeah.
Probably, I mean, it was really tough for me to decide between this and the ones that are above it on the list, because I really love this fight and just the way that it plays out.
Yeah.
The creature is so cool looking. I mean, it's like a pterodactyl or something. It's just like, what the hell? And it makes so much sense where its weak points are, one on each of its wings and then one at the very tip of its very long and weirdly furry tail. And it was a bit confusing at first. Again, how do I get onto this thing when you first get to this area? And also another one of those areas where it's like the scale of this is wild. Like you're basically jumping down into this submerged, ruinous lake area. But the height of that area that you're in is massive. So at one point, if it wasn't full of water, what was going on here? Like, I don't know, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And you have to lure it, to come over to you, and being standing in a certain spot, then you jump and just grab on and hold on for dear life. I really love this fight, and it's particularly satisfying to be able to do it without ever falling off or getting knocked off.
Yeah.
You can kind of do it in one cycle. I think my time attack on this guy was like 2 minutes and 45 seconds or something. I felt really good about that. So yeah, I really like this fight, and introduces some verticality, and it teaches you that you're going to be on these things, not always just when they're on the ground.
Yeah.
So
this is the first one that is not on the ground. This is the first one that's up in the air. And the way it starts is really cool too, because it flies into the area and lands on a perch somewhere. Yeah. And then you have to stand at a very specific spot and shoot it with an arrow to get it aggravated. And I took a picture of like a screenshot of that moment and oriented it just right. So it is one of those like the come at me bro kind of moment where Wander's aiming the bow and arrow at it. But I love that point where like it's just hanging out, not doing anything. It might see you, but it doesn't care that you're there until you shoot it. And then it jumps off that perch and swoops down at you. And if you're not ready to jump up onto it, it will just knock you into the water and knock off like a third of your health bar. And so it is a badass fight. I loved it. It's also a great example of just the sense of scale that the environment has, because for as big as this thing is, it still has enough room to fly around in the area. So this flooded city is massive. And it is just amazing to take in.
I just want to know what happened in this area. I mean, it kind of speaks to the whole thing for the Forbidden Land, which is like, is it empty and desolate because of the fact that now the Colossi are there, or what? Like, I don't know. Like, was it like this area was really teeming with life, and all of a sudden it disappeared? What made it disappear? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't. Yeah. I have really no idea. It's such an interesting area.
Yeah, yeah. And what was amazing? I can't believe we didn't talk about this during our general discussion. But did you ever get down onto the beach on the western shore?
Oh no, I did not.
So like, there is a very small pathway that you can take out on the western cliffs that you can, it is up by Dirge's Fight, but that shrine has a small pathway just to the south of it that you can take down the cliffs down to the beach. And that beach is the same beach from the end of Eco. Small little Easter egg down there. There's nothing down there that you need to collect. But you, just so you know, like there is that pathway that you can take down to the beach.
And so it's like it looks identical. Is that what you mean, or is it okay? Wow,
it's the identical beach down there, but like you can't really get down there from any other way.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
love it.
Anyway, my number 2 on this, and this absolutely has like my most favorite entrance of any of the Colossus as well, and I wonder if you can guess it. It is Phalanx the Sky Snake.
I knew it. Yeah. When you said entrance, I was like, oh, it's got to be Phalanx.
This guy. This thing, this is like one of the best examples of beauty when it comes to these Colossus and just the magnificent scale of these things. This is like how his entrance is amazing, where like you ride out into this desert that has those rings in it, and if you approach the ruins, what he'll do is he'll fly out of the ground, and it's just this loud boom of like a train going by. But he flies out of the ground and up into the air, and then swirls around. And I don't know what it is about like the framing or anything, but it is like watching a train fly through the sky, and it has a lot of grace to it. And then he swirls around and starts to just travel around the desert. And he's not trying to harm you in any way. He's just existing there. And the music just adds to this, but you can just sit there and watch him glide. And it is beautiful to see this thing.
Yeah, it truly is. It seems to be inflating sacks of air under itself to keep itself afloat. Yeah, it's really a very interesting looking boss. And this is one of those things where I was thinking about those rings in the sand and going, do I get him to go through these rings? And
oh no,
you know what I mean? Like I was like, is that how it works? You know, but yeah, I really enjoyed this fight. It barely did not make my top 5, but it is. I mean, they're so close in ranking. There's really only one Colossi that I don't enjoy fighting, which we can talk about later if we want to. But this one is so cool, and the second of our sort of avian style and air fights. But this one, just being in the desert, there's a sandstorm that's going on in the area, and I love the skill expression of having to lead your arrows to hit those sacks as he's flying around, and then using aggro to jump onto his wing and stuff like that. It's like a really interesting fight.
It is like one of the coolest things. It feels so badass to do because you have to get this thing to lower its wings that start to drag in the sand. And then you have to ride up alongside it with aggro and jump from aggro onto one of the wings. And it feels like, you're about to like rob a train. But
that's exactly what it feels like.
It's like you're like riding up alongside, and then you have to make your move and jump. So I've
definitely missed, which sucks.
When me too.
You're like, oh man, I am so far behind now. Like, so yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. So and then like once you're on, he then flies up into the air, and you're like watching aggro run around down on the ground and panic, but you have to jump from the wing onto the body, and then you have to run along the body as he's like undulating through the air. And every once in a while, he might do a somersault and try and like flip you off, but you just have to be ready and grab onto him, while he's like flipping. That one feels pretty awesome.
It totally does. So in watching the speedrun, I didn't spoil it for myself. I watched the speedruns after I'd done a couple runs already of my own. Yeah. But there's apparently a way that you one cycle this guy without him diving back into the sand and having to shoot again. I haven't been able to pull it off. It involves a very specific amount of damage to the 2 sigils further up on him, and then just leaving them alive, actually, and going to the very far back sigil and having enough damage on that one to finish him off. I just don't know what the values are for that, so I haven't been able to get it to work. But it is a very cool strat if you can nail it.
Yeah, yeah. And it feels pretty satisfying too, because then like you've been able to like damage him just enough so that he's not, completely running away, but still like you're doing it enough so that like you've really figured this out. And the game doesn't tell you exactly like how much will aggravate these Colossus, but this one in particular is just like there's a very fine art to getting this one down.
And another one you can lose a lot of time to on time attack if you mess up. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay, so we are down to your number one favorite Colossus in the game.
Yes, and I think it might be a bit surprising for people. All right, it is Malice. No, it's not. Okay, so what it is Zenobia, the guard dog, actually.
Oh.
So this fight is one that there's a couple fights in the game that have really small, sort of almost pit bull or sort of dog-like looking Colossi. And they're way more unassuming in that sense. But this fight is so interesting because at the very tail end of the game here, Colossus number 14, it decides to throw platforming in a more traditional sense and really like a lot more of a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a Matador style fight into the mix where you're getting this thing to chase you around the arena. And each time it hits these pillars, they're collapsing and you use that falling pillar to jump to another pillar. And it's this whole merry chase around this courtyard in this very tucked away, beautiful little city.
Yeah.
And it culminates in this moment where you get this balcony to fall on him by collapsing this final pillar that breaks his armor that then allows you to finally go and get only a couple stabs. There's only one sigil on this guy to beat him.
Yeah.
But the reason it's my favorite fight is because of how different it is to the other fights in that it's primarily a platforming boss fight.
Yeah.
And it's asking you to execute some cool jumps, and you're really using your bow for most of the fight to keep him lured to you. And it's not till the very, very end that you pull out your sword. And yeah, I just love the area. Again, architecture in the space you fight in is a massive part of why I like some of these fights. And this is one it's really, really cool. And
the platforming moments in it are really cool because like I love that moment where like he'll ram one of the columns that you're hanging onto, and as it's falling over, you're like on the right side that it's going to it's going to be on the upright side that you're on. So you're just like, okay, yes, I'm on the right side. It's going good. But like, it just feels so awesome to run through that city and like try and get him to like ram some of those pillars, and eventually like you get that balcony falling on top of him. You're like, oh, he's finally vulnerable. I got him. And like you have to like get him all the way over to that balcony. But that's an awesome fight. I loved it. And
it's so goofy when you finally beat him too, where I don't know if you've noticed, like in the screen where the Colossi are dying, your character just kind of still hangs on to them when they're falling. And this guy is so small and close to the ground that you're basically just hanging on and he like just rolls over and you just like stay hanging on to this guy. It looks so goofy in the cutscene. But yeah, it's very fun.
Yeah. So like this also has one of those moments where like it is probably the most tucked away Colossus fight in the game, where like it is way up in the northwest past the Umbral Glade that I mentioned earlier. There's like this road that you have to take to it, and then the road has like these giant columns that you have to ride between, and then there's a cave that you take that has a small pond in it. It just keeps going and going. And I remember thinking to myself as I'm like riding the horse up that road, just thinking, where the fuck am I going? Good God.
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
This, where is this thing? Yeah.
And it's also like when you find it, I don't think it is the biggest sort of architectural structure that you encounter. I think Argus has a massive arena as well, but it certainly feels the most dense in that like you get into this courtyard and you're like, this feels like it was a courtyard for a city, and you're going up these steps that ascend to this massive door and area that Zenobia eventually comes out and attacks you from. But it invites that discovery again of like, what's behind that door? Like, what is he guarding? And I haven't done this, but it would be fun to go back to that area after you've beaten him and just explore it a bit more.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a coin or something there, but
there are a few. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Don't worry. My number one is not Malice either. But
oh, thank God.
he came close on the list. Like I do enjoy that fight. He does like he's the only the only Colossus that doesn't move around, and instead he just shoots like tank shells at you and can blow you off the cliff. But
yeah, he's actually not the one that I hate either. He's fine. I don't strong. He's whatever. Yeah. I just don't love him.
But my favorite one though has got to be Basarin, the tank. And this guy was one of those where like I did not know what to expect with this. He's kind of turtle-like, and he crawls out of this cave into this lake bed that has geysers coming up out of it. And you have to get him to crawl up over one of the geysers, and then the geyser will shoot water up onto him, and that will cause him to have weak points exposed on his feet. And then when you shoot the feet with arrows, he will roll over like a turtle, and then you have to grab onto one of his spots and start to climb before he gets back up onto his feet. That moment where you get him to roll over, it's like watching a car, like a giant car, flip over and crash. It is because it's so loud. There's just dust everywhere as he rolls. It's crazy looking, and it feels badass to just like as that's happening, you have Wander running full speed toward it, and it feels like he's running into a war zone. So I love that one. And then like as he turns over, then you have to like crawl over to his backside and then run up his back toward his head. The first time I played it, I thought like, oh, there's probably going to be like a maze on the back, like that I have to I make my way through. No, it's fine. You just have to run straight through down his back. But it's still like really cool.
He's a great boss too. For some reason on the last run I did, I was having a hell of a time getting onto this guy. So like I was crawling on him on his underside, and then there's a point where he's going to roll over. So you need to transition to be like on top of him when he rolls over. Right. And the physics just kept throwing me off. And it was so weird because like the first couple times I played the game, I had no issues with this guy, you know, or the issue was more trying to get him over a geyser. But for whatever reason, the last time I played, he was just not cooperating, which was a bummer. But he's a very cool design. And also, it's one of the only areas that, other than like a waterfall or something, we see a distinct geographic feature in the Forbidden Lands with these geysers coming up. So that's a really fun piece as well.
Yeah, I love that one. Okay, well, Colin, thank you so much for talking about Shadow of the Colossus with me. This has been a great conversation.
Absolutely. I appreciate you inviting me onto the show. It's been great to get to talk about a game more in depth.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Again, remind us where can people find you?
Sure. So yeah, Trophy Talk Podcast is my bi-weekly trophy hunting show that I do with two other co-hosts, Slugger and Daryl Fuimano. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts at Trophy Talk Podcast.
Awesome.
And if you want to get in touch with me, CK Present anywhere you would look.
Okay, great. And for me, again, the Portland Kevin on Discord, psplusgameclub@gmail.com. Have a great day, Colin. And everyone out there, have fun playing around.
Thank you. Goodbye.